I have to say, I'm with you.
So your father, though, like, you're saying about, really thinking about that generation. I mean, did you sense, what were his politics like? What did he carry with him after that or through that?
Well, my dad, he came from sort of aristocratic, minor aristocratic, not aristocratic, but posh upper class.
Yeah.
Russian background.
Oh, yeah.
His mother was a countess.
Oh, wow.
He was born on the Russian estates that were then taken by the Bolsheviks. He was a young man in London before watching the rise of fascism. And as so many young people were, it's the original Antifa group who were fighting against the rise of fascism in London. And there was a famous march in East London by Oswald Mosley, who was the sort of English fascist who wanted England to combine with Germany, Hitler, and become a fascist nation, basically. And they had their black shirts. I think they were walking through the Jewish quarter of the East End. And my father went on the so-called riot or the peaceful demonstration against this fascist march. So his politics were left-wing as a young man. I think any young, intelligent person in the 1930s was left-wing. It was the rise of the unions, the rise of the concept of sort of a world where people without money could get an education, for example. So
that's what you grew up in.
The rise of the welfare. So I grew up in that sort of world, absolutely.
So he was a musician and a leftist and an intellectual and somebody who was engaged politically.
But Marc, my mum was a working class girl, intelligent, left school at 14, the 13th of 14 children.
Oh, my God.
Absolutely. Talking about the children. Can you imagine?
That must have been what
I think
did
at that point, you just don't really think about it anymore, probably.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's like that scene in the Monty Python's The Meaning of Life where Terry Jones is washing the dishes and a baby just plops out from under the counter.
Yes, exactly. Yes, exactly. That must be my grandmother on my mum's side.
Right.
She was working class, exactly. And economically, financially, we were very working class in the sense, and my dad finished up being a taxi driver. In fact, he did the knowledge. And I do you know what the knowledge is?
No.
Doing the knowledge is what London cabbies have to do to become a licensed black cab driver in London.
It sounds it sounds like an important thing.
It isn't. Well, what they do is they learn basically every street in London. They have to learn literally the name of and where every street in London.
Do they still?
Yes, they still do. They still do the knowledge. GPS now, maybe eventually the knowledge will disappear, but it still is in existence. And then when they do the test, they say, okay, it's 4:30 in the afternoon.
Right.
You have to get from this street in North London to this street in South London. Describe me your route. And so the knowledge is that you have to say, okay, I turn left on James's Street, and then I turn right on Thursday Street, and then
you have to take in consideration the traffic.
The traffic, exactly.
Oh,
so that's the knowledge, and when you pass that, then you get that's why London cabbies are amazing.
Yeah,
I really advise anyone. They're more money now, but London cabbies are incredible.
I don't think I've been educated that well in anything that I do.
You go on instinct. That's pretty good as well. That works.
Well, I guess like what I was getting at is that there was at least an environment where it seems like they were encouraging of the arts, I'm assuming.
They were. I mean, we couldn't financially. We didn't have television. We didn't go to the cinema, actually.
No?
We didn't go to the theatre. Well, no, financially, literally, we couldn't afford.
Well, how did you decide to pursue acting?
I'll tell you what happened. I saw an amateur production of Hamlet. The one time my mum, apart from this, I'd only ever seen shows at the end of the pier, which I loved.
Well, what kind of shows were those?
show you have girls come on dancing.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I absolutely wanted to be one of those girls. And then the comedian came on, and he made me literally fall off my seat with laughing. It was a variety show, end of the pier variety show. And that was my first experience of the theatre. And I remember it to this day.
Who was the comedian?
I absolutely loved it. He was a guy called Terry Scott. He was an English comedian. You look him up when we finish.
Okay.
Terry Scott.
Okay.
Scott.
Got it.
And he was the guy who was at the end of the pier when I saw my first theatre.
Why isn't that the name of a play? The End of the Pier. Somebody should write that show.
Yes, they should. And
I love what I love what it means, because I would never like that, and that was something people knew, that there was a show at the end of the pier. That's where you see.
Yeah.
The show. I love it.
South End, my hometown, was famous. Well, it wasn't famous at all for this, but it has the longest pier in the world. It does have the longest pier in the world. It's a mile and a quarter long, and you have to take a little train out.
Is it still there?
I think yes, it is still there.
So you see this comedian, you see the dancers, and do they do sketches too?
I'm sure they did sketches. They did a bit of boring, warbling singing. That never, appealed to me.
But you knew you wanted to be on stage.
Yeah, and then I saw an amateur production of Hamlet.
Yeah. By
the South End Shakespeare Society, and that was really what. That just completely blew me away. Not because it was a terrible production, I'm sure. I do remember their tights all being sort of wrinkly around their ankles.
Yeah.
But the story, I was just so blown away by the story. And I mean, can you imagine that's why I don't think Shakespeare should be taught in schools. Can you imagine watching Shakespeare for the first time when you're about 13 or 14 and you don't know what happens? You don't know that Ophelia goes mad and dies. You don't know that Hamlet's going to come back. You don't know that they're all going to die. You have no idea of the story. So you watch it like a thriller, because it is an incredible thriller.
Yeah, yeah.
And to have that thriller of watching, going, oh my God, what's going to happen next? With that poetry, with those incredible conceptions, into thoughts in your mind at the same time. I mean, and that was sort of my experience.
Wow, because I've been sort of this ignoramus on my show over the years in terms of how I've been sort of unable to engage with Shakespeare in the way that a lot of people do. And I've told Shakespearean actors this, and Ian McKellen sat. Yeah,
I know it very well. Yeah.
Yeah, he sat across from me and did Shakespeare to my face.
Of course he did. Of course he did. He would.
It was that monologue about immigrants, I think, from the Thomas More. It wasn't.
Yes, I've heard him do that.
Yeah,
that speech,
right.
Actually,
yeah.
Yes. Because it must have been around the time he was doing his one-man show, probably, was it? But that's wonderful. But
he just
yes,
and it connected with me, because my problem is maybe it's as an American, or maybe just as a person, because I enjoy being engaged, but I do get a little lost with the language, and it becomes difficult for me to sort of follow the story.
Totally. The language can be very, very, it is very difficult, but with a great production and great actors, that clarifies an awful lot of it,
So that's what happened to you. You were 13, and you were just, your mind was blown.
My mind was blown by the story as much as anything. It's a fabulous world. It was so different from my boring little dormitory town I felt that I was living in, suburban street and all the rest of it. And to see, so that engaged my imagination, and I became quite obsessed at that point with not so much with certainly not with the intellectual stuff of Shakespeare, but just the stories and the characters.
And you'd already wanted to be on stage. You knew that, and
I didn't know that, no, but I knew I wanted to imaginatively live in these other worlds.
Oh, so this was before the End of the Pier thing?
No, after the end of the pier thing.
So you got
The end
both
of the pier
sides.
thing-
You got
yes,
the
exactly.
burlesque,
Yeah.
and then you got Hamlet.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of me in a nutshell, actually.
There you go.
There you go.
Figured out the source of your being.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you slowly engage with the process of becoming a theater person?
Becoming an actor? Well, I went to a teachers training college because I couldn't afford to go to drama school. But there was a teachers training college where you're
going to learn to be a teacher. Okay.
Yeah. But I was a hopeless teacher. I mean, I was so hopeless, useless.
Do you want to be a mother? Do you want to be a teacher? It's good.
No,
you know your limitations.
Didn't want to be a teacher. But there was this great organization called the National Youth Theatre in Britain that allowed kids who didn't come from a financially, supportive background could go and in your summer holidays you went and did theatre.
Yeah.
And that sort of launched me. I did Cleopatra in Antony and Cleopatra with that organization, and it the press would come. That was the great thing, that the critics from the newspapers would come. So they gave me a good press, and from that moment on, as soon as I left college, I went to the Royal Shakespeare Company.
So that's where you actually trained, because you just had a knack.
Yeah.
You had a knack for it. Is that what you would say?
Well, it's like a lot of jobs, isn't it? Really, you can't really train. What you can do is practice. Training is, and you can practice and be guided in your practice, and I'm sure that's the same with music and with art, painting.
Right. So the ideas of practice then are, how do I connect, this text to who I am or to what's necessary to make it convincing.
Exactly. And I was lucky that I was being paid, not very much, but being paid to practice and to learn with the Royal Shakespeare Company. But I was kind of in at the deep end. I started off, boom, at quite a high level.
Why is that? Because you had a natural gift, I guess.
I guess. Yes. and also, and a drive, and the gift is one thing. The drive is the most important, isn't it? Don't you think, Marc, in life, you see incredibly gifted people wasting their gifts because they don't have the drive. And then you see less gifted people with incredible drive, and they do better.
A lot of times the gifted people who don't have the drive, it's just that they have it, it's just going into them. They're driving themselves into the wall of their heart.
Yes, no, absolutely, and it's tragic when you see that happen.
It is.
It's devastating.
It is.
On the other hand, you see another kid, who just their imagination has been engaged by something, and they are just absolutely driven to do this. And I, that's what art is. It's the drive. Really.
But it's not like, it's interesting because now, ambition and drive can be applied to different things. But the drive you're talking about is not. It's not a career drive. It's a passion.
Oh no, it's not a career drive at all.
Right, no. It's a passion to be fully immersed in the thing.
It's the creative passion, absolutely.
Yeah. So, who are the people you were working with? Would I know any of them?
Who are my contemporaries? Quite a lot of them have died.
Oh, have they?
Mike Leigh, the film director.
I've been watching his movies. Oh my God! Yes,
Mike Leigh was an assistant director. Marc Rylance was in the. I'm sure you know who Marc is. He was one of the young actors that in my group.
That's interesting. I didn't know that about Mike Leigh. So he was what was his role in the Royal Shakespeare?
He was an assistant director. He was in the directorial world, but he was an assistant director. And in fact, we saw him, aside from the RSC, but in his own time, start with experimenting on this sort of improvisational, at that time,